Hello and welcome to Channel 17's Town Meeting Television. I'm Matt Kelly, your host for another 2018 Candidate Forum. On tonight's show, Vermont Republican primary candidates for U.S. Senator. We have Brooke Paige joining us from Williston and from Essex Junction, Jasdeep Panu. We thank you both for being here. A reminder that this is a live call-in show. If you have a question for either of our two candidates, we invite you to call in directly at 862-3966. Again, that number is 862-3966. And we welcome all our viewers enjoying our online stream at ch17.tv/live. Time now for our opening statements. Our format works very simply. Each candidate is allowed a minute or more for an opening statement. Then we'll go to questions of each candidate, where the opposite candidate will have an opportunity to rebut or follow up the original candidate's response. So without further ado, we go to our opening statements, and we begin with you, Jasdeep Panu from Essex Junction.
Thank you. I'm Attorney Jasdeep Panu. I'm running for United States Senate. I am one of the 4 men on the United States Senator Republican primary ballot. We have a very common sense and educational-based platform. We want roads, not rehabs, crayons, not computers, pencil and paper back in school. Our goal is to make the Child Trafficking Enforcement Agency replace the DEA. The drug catastrophe, drug trade, whatever way you want to describe it, is the most vicious, violent, corrupt, epic failure in criminal justice history. I know this firsthand because I have been a criminal defense attorney for 13 years, and there are over 30 million people involved in the modern-day slave trade. It's disgusting. We've lost children to the slave trade because we are chasing drug dealers. That is inexcusable prioritization. And what is happening at the borders is very much a slave trade issue, because our goal should be to get the most vicious, violent immigrants, and those are slave traders. The importance of voting on August 14th is this. There are 4 men, as I said, on the Republican United States Senator ticket. I am one of them. First, let's start with Rocky De La Fuente. He is not only mocking Vermont, he's actually on the ballot in 5 states, including Rhode Island, Connecticut, Florida, and his Vermont ballot actually shows that he's a San Diego, California resident. Next, there's Brooke Paige, who is sitting next to me, and he is actually, through one petition, got on 7 ballots. So he's not only sitting here today for U.S. Senator, but he's also on for U.S. Congress, Justice of the Peace, Lieutenant Governor, Attorney General, Secretary of State. If I am missing one, I guess I can ask him as he's sitting next to me.
Auditor of Accounts and Treasurer.
Thank you. As I said, everything we do is based on education, and we are also adamant Second Amendment supporters, because we believe that education is part of the Second Amendment, and as it is for the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 8th, as we believe all of those to be on the same level. Please go vote on the primary on August 14th. Once again, my name is Jasdeep Panu, and I appreciate you taking time to listen to me. Thank you.
Very good. Brooke Paige, your opening statement.
Very good. Well, first of all, I'm going to clear up a little issue that while Williston's a wonderful town, I'm actually from Washington, Vermont, down out in the redneck Riviera of Vermont there. And I guess to simplify everything, I'm really running because I think good old Bernie Sanders really needs to retire. He really needs the opportunity to spend some time in his 3 mini mansions, 2 of which are here in Vermont, and spend some of that $7 million that he has accumulated, in addition to his retirement fund with the U.S. Senate, which is about another $7 million if you annualized it out. Mr. Sanders looks out for Mr. Sanders, and that's about it. He's acted basically as the socialist Pied Piper, if you like, of the young folks here in Vermont and throughout the country, promising them everything, everything for free, and never bothering to try to explain to them who actually has to pay for that. He used to rail against the millionaires and billionaires until somebody pointed out that he was one of the millionaires, and so he's kind of cut that from his rhetorical song, if you like. I really believe that Republicans have to find a true champion for the general election. And that's not me, it's not Jasdeep, it's not Lawrence or Rocky, because we're all small fish. Okay, except for me, I don't think any of the other. Well, Rocky has run for everything, everywhere from the beginning of time, but Jasdeep and Lawrence, this is their first time into politics. I've run for 7 or 8 offices over the past 4 cycles, and I haven't got a shot as well. But if I'm elected in the primary, the party will substitute a well-experienced, well-qualified individual to run on the Republican ticket in the general election. And this is part of the whole thing that Jasdeep was talking about. I've run as a placeholder because many of the offices I'm running from, there was no one else to run. And if I hadn't run, the Democrats would have, as they have in the past, flooded over, written in their published Democratic candidate on the Republican ballot, and precluded the party from being able to put onto the general election ballot well-qualified, well-known people who either were too busy in their private or professional lives or didn't even consider running even though they were well-qualified. And that's what this is all about. Let's get Mr. Sanders out to his vacation home here on Lake Champlain and get somebody else who has different and important priorities for the entire country down to Washington, and not somebody like Mr. Sanders who's just biding time in his senatorial seat for the next presidential cycle.
Okay. Well, if I could reply, please.
Okay,
you know, I mean, it's a little offensive to hear Mr. Paige tell me that I'm not really prepared to qualified for this. You know, as I've stated, I've been a criminal defense attorney for 13 years. I've been a teacher for 10 years, and I don't know where people are saying that, you know, I'm not qualified or I'm not a strong enough candidate. Let's first look at what is going on currently in Capitol Hill. As I said, we have a common sense platform, and the reality is common sense is just lacking in DC, and really on a lot of local issues as well. I do not believe in the fact that you just are going to go and put your name on a petition and then believe all of a sudden the Vermont GOP is somehow magically going to appear with, I guess, the revision of Abraham Lincoln coming through. I mean, that's just a terrible, I believe it's a kind of a poor attitude to have about the Republican faith. And I think it's also showing a lack of confidence in the Republican Party. And you know, we do not believe that we don't think about anything anyway besides the primary. And so that's really only our focus for now. And you know, anything else beyond that is what everybody should be focused on.
Very good, Jasdeep. Thank you very much.
Well,
And
if
Brooke
I
Paige.
may, it was a little bit of a attack
I
back.
do
So I
just
just take a moment,
Okay,
you know.
if I can just go back to ground rules here for a second. We've only gone to our opening comments at this point.
I understand.
And we have a third candidate who's come in who would like to also voice his
Absolutely.
opening comment. So we'll give you 30 seconds for
All
a
I need.
response, and we'll hold you at 30 seconds.
Very good.
Brooke Paige.
Yeah, I certainly didn't say that Jasdeep wasn't a highly qualified individual. You know, I merely said, if double check back, that I said he is a political novice. He hasn't run for office, at least here in Vermont, before that I'm aware of. And even though that I consider myself a political novice as well. And my point is, against a seasoned veteran like Mr. Sanders, we all have a very, very poor chance. And maybe there's somebody better out there that the Republicans could field in for the general election. That's all I was saying.
Okay, all right, we'll leave it there. We'll just have to leave it there. We do have another candidate who has joined us, and we'll get to his opening statement in just a moment. Just a reminder that if you do have a question for one of our candidates here, this is a live call-in show, and you are encouraged to dial 863-3966. Again, 862-3966. Time now for another opening statement from another of our Republican candidates. Please introduce yourself to the audience and explain why you're running for this office.
Thank you. My name is Lawrence Zupan, and I'm seeking your vote on August 14th in the Republican primary. What is my background? I'm a lifetime observer of what works and what doesn't work in both the political and the governmental realm. I grew up in a politically engaged family. I was a civil rights activist when I was in my early teens, and I have been a close observer and a voter all of my life. And all of this observation has been informed by a lifetime of business and my educational background, which includes my MBA. I've negotiated trade contracts with the Chinese before it was fashionable. I opened up the Soviet Union to art exhibitions previously prohibited for world-famous artist Peter Max. I've set up packing plants in foreign countries to source scarce goods for the American industry. I've worked with 3 different presidents' offices, both Democratic and Republican, to support their visions. I'm a real estate broker, and most importantly, I've raised my family of 3 children with my wife of 25 years right here in Vermont. Let me tell you one of the stories that most inspired me to want to come forward as I thought about it. One time I woke up early in the morning. Fortunately, I did wake up because smoke filled my house. Long story short, the firemen were there like this. And one of the firemen was wearing a striped trouser, and it was told to me that that fireman jumped out of his honeymoon bed from his wedding the night before to be at my house in under 5 minutes. That is the kind of service and the kind of dedication that the people of Vermont deserve, which I received, which I plan on giving back as a senator. As I walked in, I heard one of my worthy opponents talking about the size of fish or something like that, and who could compete with Senator Sanders. Well, let me tell you something. I can compete with Senator Sanders not only because I have the street smarts of New York City, which has been part of Senator Sanders' stock in trade since he came to Vermont, but also because of the superiority of my ideas and my vision and my ability to communicate it, which I hope to share with you in the hour that unfolds here.
Okay, if we may.
But I'm not finished, if I may. There was about 20 minutes of talk before the 6 o'clock, and I'd like to have just another minute to finish.
Well, we didn't start that early, so if you don't mind, 30 seconds to wrap up your opening statement, then we've got lots of questions and topics to cover.
Fair enough. 30 seconds. Fellow Vermonters, I have a compelling belief that because of the strength of America's foundations, our best days are ahead. And even more exciting, I believe that they are right on our horizon. Vermont needs a senator who will facilitate and encourage rather than hamper that wonderful opportunity. You'll hear more during our discussion. And by the way, I believe in health care for all, but the only way it will ever become available is through competition and innovation, not through government monopoly and not through crony capitalist monopolies.
And we'll have to leave it there because now we'll go on to our questions at this time. Thank you, Lawrence. We'll begin with the questions with you, Brooke, and then each candidate will also get to have their response. And we're just going to begin right off the top here with your legislative priorities. If you are elected to the U.S. Senate, what is your first priority?
Well, single first priority, I think, is to bring some bipartisanship back to the U.S. Senate. It seems that the 2 parties have become so balkanized that I'm getting hand signals here. Become so balkanized that we're basically getting nothing done or very little done, and it's all falling on the president to try to move things along. I think if there was more of a bipartisan spirit towards things that need to be tended to, the economy for one, foreign trade for another, dealing with the immigration troubles that we're currently having. These are all important topics, and they're all things that aren't getting taken care of because everybody's finding their little corner to hide in and refusing to budge or make any moves towards the middle.
All right. Thank you, Brooke Paige. Lawrence, bipartisanship, is that your first priority if you were to be elected to the U.S. Senate?
Well, whether it's my first or a priority, certainly would be important because to get legislation passed, you definitely need cooperation on both sides of the aisle. But when we're talking about priorities, one of the priorities of this election season, as determined by the Medicare for All crowd, which seems to be very loud throughout the country, is a correct approach to how we deliver health care in this country. Everybody, every person of goodwill wishes for the best possible health care for the greatest number of people. The question is, how is that going to happen? When you say Medicare for all, you're essentially saying Medicare for none. Because most regrettably, the $32 trillion 10-year plan of Senator Sanders is not only not workable, but he himself admits he's only figured out how to pay for half of it and would leave the other half to burgeon our national debt. And the $16 trillion that he thinks he knows how to pay for would include raising 5 different taxes as if all of those dollars will just stand still waiting to be taxed. I can tell you this, what is going to work and what is going to deliver the kind of satisfactory improvement in our health system is not government control. Look at what they've done with the Veterans Administration, the most precious slice of our citizenry. 21 million people can't even get the correct health care consistently that they deserve and have earned by putting their lives on the line. And now, this same government, which by the way took $2 billion to not produce a healthcare website, we're going to turn over 13% of the American economy to.
And time.
I don't think that's going to work. What will work is innovation, and what will work is creativity and competition.
Very good.
And I'll talk more about it.
Very good. Just a reminder to our candidates to please keep your responses to a minute or less. We have several areas that we'd like to cover and to give each candidate an equal opportunity here. Jasdeep here, what is your legislative priority if you were to be elected to the U.S. Senate?
My legislative priority is, as I stated, is to make the Child Trafficking Enforcement Agency replace the DEA. And I'll start with one number there, and specifically, we spend $80 billion a year to house 1.2 million non-violent drug offenders. And that is just the incarceration costs. That does not include money that goes towards the DEA, nor does it go towards court costs, nor does it go towards local drug court costs. So when you get into just this one arena of drug catastrophe, there's so much money that will open up. And we have the platform also to make roads, not rehabs. Our goal is to cut drug rehabs by 30% in 2 years, 50% in 5 years, and then 90% in 7 to 8 years. And the basis for that is we know the drug rehabilitation industry is a complete failure because it is growing. That is an industry like cholesterol should not be getting higher in numbers. And that is the way we will actually achieve our goals. I mean, we don't have ideas, we have goals.
Okay,
Thank you.
good. Jesse Pennant. Moving right along, Lawrence, this question to you. You briefly touched on health care and Senator Sanders' position on it. The question is, do you believe health care is a right, and how would you try to make sure that all Vermonters have the coverage that they need affordably?
Well, if health care is a right, then why is not eating a right? And why is not a roof over your head a right? The problem with calling anything a right is that as soon as you call it a right, you are basically telling whoever has to deliver that good and service that they must work, or the people who pay for it must work for the people who have those rights. That is not the foundation of America. But what has made America the most successful entrepreneurial country in the history of the world at delivering the greatest number of goods and services to its citizenry is free innovation, is competition. Here's what's going to help the situation here in Vermont. Why are there just so few healthcare providers in Vermont? Why are not the doors of competition thrown wide open? Why can we buy 40 different kinds of breakfast cereal, but we can only have a tiny handful of choices when it comes to healthcare? The reason we have 40 choices of cereal and we can have all different kinds of quality and choices and prices is because it's free. There's free enterprise. When we make the barriers to entering the insurance industry low and we allow interstate placement with low barriers for all insurance companies who want to come to Vermont to be here, you will see what always happens with products when there's competition. The quality goes up and the price goes down. In addition, what's equally important is we need to lower the barriers for new pharmaceutical products and new biomedical inventions, particularly in this great age of amazing advances with the genome. We need to make it so that you don't have to have $100 million to get an FDA approval. That in itself would allow so many more stem cell, genome, biomedical, ingenious things to come to the market for our people's health, driving down the cost of health care, raising the standard of health, and solving a lot of the problems that have only been made worse by government mandates.
Okay. Jasdeep Panu, is healthcare a right? And if not, how would you deliver a better healthcare product for all of Vermonters more affordably?
Well, I agree, it's not a right, but it is something that I think we should try to address. And specifically right now, as I said, I'm not about having any kind of free system or anything like that, but we should be using our money appropriately. That is going to the wrong places to make sure that we are promoting scientific development and also improving the healthcare system. Our specific plan for the healthcare system, once again, as I said, I gave some numbers, but we have so many resources that are wasted, I believe, currently, and specifically towards not just drug catastrophes, but as I said, we say schools and not prisons for a reason. There are resources to at least initiate this process, and our goal is to have a new medical system where I do not understand why we have 4 or 5 different insurances. Last time I checked, my eyes were connected to my lungs, and doctors can actually determine by looking at your gum line if you have intestinal problems. So I've always believed we should have one inclusive hospital system, and we should really be focusing on just making sure that everyone is taken care of, and that should be a field based on merit alone. Unlike law enforcement, this should be based on merit alone. We should be, whether you are a billionaire or a bum, we should be promoting research and development for new medicines, new technologies, to new surgeries, everything, but that needs to go at a point where doctors are not incentivized by monetary stimulations to end up overprescribing, which we know has led to a terrible opiate crisis, but it's beyond anything like that. But these are simple things that we believe can be done. We have the resources. The goals can be accomplished, but the focus needs to be in the right place. And I think Medicaid is really a flawed system. We are obviously continuously having issues with it. And I know sometimes we end up having people that somehow they have Medicaid, but somehow now they have to get a supplemental insurance. So simply by having the platform that we want and the goal we want to make of the new hospital, you will cut an enormous amount of costs just in administrative fees. But also you will actually be promoting a better healthcare system because it'll be merit-based and not monetary-based, and so we will unlikely be able to, we won't have anything like the overprescriptions that happened in the unfortunate opiate crisis.
Very good. Brooke, we're going to get to your response in just 1 minute.
Okay.
We do have a listener call-in comment, and we'll go to that phone call now. Caller, you're on the air. Do you have a question for our candidates for Republican U.S. Senator? Caller, are you there? Are you on the line?
Are they still there, Aiden?
Okay, apparently we don't have that call. We've dropped it. We'll go to you, Brooke Paige. Is health care a right? And if not, how would you guarantee a better health care outcome for Vermonters as U.S. Senator?
Well, Mr. Sanders always talks about health care for all, and basically that's another phrase for socialism. And socialism fails every time it's tried. Take a look at Venezuela, Nicaragua, Italy, the old USSR. It never works out real well. I think that healthcare is not a right. It's a service. And somebody has to provide those services, as I think Lawrence was mentioning a few moments ago. It has to be paid for. People have to come to work. They've had extensive educations for which they expect to be remunerated for. Is it a responsibility of government and the citizens? Yes, but that's different. It's not something that somebody can demand. It's something that the citizenry and the government should be expected to try to provide in some manner, and that's a different philosophy. Instead of coming in and demanding all manner of service, everybody has a right, I guess, to expect the government to provide at least a minimum level of care. As far as how do we straighten out the mess we have now, I think that free enterprise is the answer. I think that interstate competition, not only for expanded services, but also for insurance. Here in Vermont, our insurance options are limited to in-state, and I think that expanding that would be a great deal. We also have the problem with certificates of need in the state, where the, I guess it's now the Vermont Healthcare Board controls who can provide what services. And just recently we had a number of doctors who wanted to have a surge center built where they could provide surgical services for like half the price. And UVM Medical blocked them for several years, and they wound up spending almost $1 million just trying to get the necessary certificates. And it was only when UVM finally relented that they were able to get it. I think we need open pricing, so when you go into a hospital, you know how much things cost. If If the aspirin's costing $5 a pill, you know that up front. You know exactly what's going on when you get in there, so that if you don't have health care on the tail end and you wind up having to pay for it yourself, somebody has to justify the bill rather than just handing you a bill for $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 and expecting you to pay it.
Okay, very good. Brooke Paige, I understand that we have another caller here. We'll go ahead and take that caller. Caller, you're on the air. Do you have a question for our Republican candidates for Senate? Yes, you are on the air. You're on the air. Go ahead and ask your question.
I'm going to assume that I am. I have a question for Attorney Panu. Can you describe, in terms of education, this pencil and paper versus electronic gadgets?
Yep. Thank you. We are all about the fundamentals, and we believe pencil and paper should be back in school. The importance of handwriting, I do not know how this ever escaped any Secretary of Education. It has been shown by the study of graphology that when you are handwriting something, your mood, temperament, IQ are literally manifested by the handwriting, because there is a physiological connection when you write something. For example, if you were to write the word television, the Television, every letter that you write is somehow connected to your brain. But when you are on a computer or an iPad or anything like that, no matter if you write the word television, love, idea, whatever it is, there's no physiological connection, because the handwriting motions are gone, and every word is on the same level, which is what causes the stagnation, I believe, in a lot of young individuals, and it really inhibits organic brain growth. And so it's unfortunate that we have lost these simple principles, but this is the reason Panu for the People is always about just following the fundamentals and focusing on the foundation of our country, as opposed to right now what's going on is, I believe, we're worried about the interior color of the house. I mean, our foundation is crumbling, but these are the reasons we don't have a strong foundation. Our students are not able to organically grow their brain because somebody does not realize that cell phones, computers are extremely damaging to a young growing brain, just because of the neurological triggers that go off by the sensation of touching a screen. They are physiologically addicted. It is proven that they are, if not more addictive, but they are at least as addictive as cigarettes, if not more. The individuals that are the CEOs of Google, et cetera, like that, those kinds of companies that are top level officials, their kids will be going to high schools and elementary schools that do not have computers. And there's a reason for that, because they understand that what is going through the designated computer technology is not the best way for an individual to organically grow their brain, and it is causing inhibition. I also believe it also causes desensitization. The continuous touching of the screen and watching videos 100% causes desensitization, and that's what happens why when you're typing something you lose that emotion of, as opposed to handwriting it or seeing someone in person. That's why you get this kind of the muscle texting power, where you will text something that you would never say to an individual to their face. And that's because the desensitization is happening. And when you take that on the cumulative, when students have started using an iPad at 2 years old, 3 years old, and now they're at 8, 9, the hours that go into that and the amount of structure that their brain has lost because of the fact that they are simply hitting this neurological addictive trigger, it's no way in at all ever going to benefit our development of society.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
A long-winded response. We appreciate that very much. Again, to the candidates, we ask that they try to keep the answers to a limited time, as we have so many questions to get to. Brooke, we're going to ask you for a response to that.
Okay, of course.
Posit. Technology versus fundamentals.
Well, I think that Jasdeep points to
Can you say Mr. Panu, please? It's really...
Okay.
Still can call me Brooke, as long as you don't call me late for supper there. Mr. Panu, I guess, points to one symptom of a bigger problem, and other parts of that same problem are the development of Common Core. And one of the big things about Common Core is to disconnect the parents from the educational experience. And that's, fortunately, we're seeing the federal government is now going to roll educational responsibility back to the states. Now, unfortunately, in Vermont, the state legislature, through Act 46, is trying to wrestle control away from and has really almost succeeded in wrestling control away from the local school districts. And here in Vermont, we've had a long tradition of keeping education as close to home as possible, keeping the parents involved as possible, and keeping the townspeople as involved as possible. And while I'm not an attorney, I'm actually the one and only person fighting in state court, now before the state Supreme Court, to roll back Act 46, because I believe it's unconstitutional. I believe that also, as a result of the activity in the lower court, in the Superior Court in Orange County, that it's now incumbent upon me to also have the Brigham decision overturned, which spawned Act 60. And so all of these things are interconnected, and all of them really in the end have violated the state constitution and need to be reversed.
Okay, Brooke Paige. Lawrence, we'll move to you. The question was about technology versus the fundamentals in learning.
Well, it's fascinating because, first of all, just coming back to a point that both of my colleagues here made, I agree that state control, local control, the closer the control, the responsibility, and the decision-making is to those who are most affected by those decisions, the more constitutional it is, and the more effective it is, and the more effective for the purpose that the individual endeavor was started will be served. Particularly true in education, where parents already have the normal tendency to be greatly engaged in how their children are being educated. To me, the biggest issue with education, when I think about it, is the emphasis on pushing our high school graduates into brick and mortar schools and jacking up $50,000 to $150,000 debt, which is the way they start their post-grad careers. Ironically, at a time when all of the wisdom, all of the knowledge, and all of the learning accumulated through all of history is almost miraculously being made available online. And the growth of online education is something to be encouraged, developed, and helped to proliferate, because it's available for pennies on the dollar, and sometimes and frequently superior to what the brick and mortars provide, with all due respect to them. But not every student needs to pay for all of the amenities that go with a brick and mortar college, but wants the essence of the education, where you can get the best professors on the most focused subjects available right on your computer. So I think that is something that truly needs to be encouraged.
Okay. Lawrence Zupan, looks like we have a response. Just if you'd like to respond briefly, please.
Just to follow up, we also have one of our goals is to have a 2-year maternity leave, because we believe that part of the issues that are going on with the unfortunate incidents at schools on any level is based on the fact that we just don't have a common core or a common connection with the parents and the communities. I think a 2-year maternity leave will allow that connection again, and I think that will also address, and also, we want at 3 years old to have second languages started, to have art, music, and our good sports fields for all our kids, because those are things that can organically develop a brain. We know that they work. It's unfortunate right now we have our students that are being eviscerated of art, music, and sports, and it's extremely unfortunate, but the attachment happens at an early age, and I think that will lead to better community connections, and I think that will actually alleviate a lot of social issues. And along with the fact that we say books, not iPads, and at least till the 5th grade, we believe that it should just be a specifically fundamental curriculum.
Okay, very good. Follow up, Brooke?
Sure, and I'll be real brief. Not being an attorney, that's a lot easier for me. The only thing I wanted to mention, Lawrence was talking all about college and college debt and things, and I think one of the focuses that we seem to have too much, and I think partially it's because kids graduate from high school insufficiently prepared for life, but I think that we need to have more direction towards vocational education and having non-college track. So many people that I know, young folks, have graduated from college with 4-year degrees in the arts and gone on when they couldn't find a job and gotten a master's degree in the arts and still can't find a job, go on and get a PhD in things that they can't get a job in. Well, now they do have the $150,000 in debt, and they wind up working at the local fast food joint. It's an absolute crime. Whereas if they had been directed instead into culinary arts or auto mechanics or a host of other fields, in 2 years with very little debt, they'd be off to a vibrant life and a vibrant career.
Very good. Follow-up, Lawrence, on this question?
I agree. I think it's an excellent point that education, I mean, when I was growing up, college had to be the track because it was almost a cultural thing. But we found that the supply and demand of college-educated people relative to the jobs that are available to accommodate all these people has changed in the last 20 or 30 years. And there's so many wonderful vocational opportunities, as Brooke pointed out, that could lead people down a very successful path. I think the emphasis needs to be made, the cultural emphasis needs to be shifted, and parents, of course, are the ones who should decide what influences their children are subject to and what the directions are that they take. I think the top-down influence that occurs in high school, which does overemphasize the next step being necessarily college, is somewhat misplaced for some people.
Okay, we're going to move on here to another topic here, and this time it's the environment. And I want to ask, we'll start with Brooke Paige here, your response. What do you see as the responsibility of the federal government to assist in cleaning up Lake Champlain? What do you see as the responsibility of the federal government to help clean up Lake Champlain?
Well, being a local up rather than a top down kind of person, I think that we first have to identify what those problems are. And here in Vermont, the number one problem is Lake Champlain and Lake Carmi and the Missisquoi River and a dozen other waterways and bodies of water in the state that have become polluted. Unfortunately, the news media and the advocates have all pointed to the farmer, as if the farmer's biggest desire is to pour the valuable phosphates that are supposed to feed his crops into the river and allow his topsoil, his big investment, to go the same way. And in fact, we should be, the federal government and the state government should be doing everything they can do to assist the farmer in retaining those valuable assets on his property and sending them back into the crops rather than down the river. The biggest problem, though, appears to be the pollution is really coming from antiquated sewer systems and septic systems. That here in Burlington, they have commingled sewage, which is the storm water being commingled with the sewage. So every time we have a big thunderstorm, you hear Moreau Weinberger, oh my God, we've had another tragedy, a thunderstorm. Like this is like a once in a lifetime event or something. The most recent time, I think they also blamed it on a mechanical valve failure. When you're talking 3 million gallons of sewage, this isn't a little hiccup or a little mistake. I actually, about a week ago, said, how much is 3 million gallons? And I found out that the amount of gallonage in one of these big milk carriers that you see, tractor trailer type, and the amount of spillage of sewage, and they say, oh, treated sewage. Well, all that means is they took out the big stuff that was going to float on top before they shot it into the lake. It would take 461 of those tankers to hold the amount of sewage that Burlington dumped into the lake in the one last go-round. Of course, nobody sees it go out there because there's a pipe 300 miles out onto the bottom of Lake Champlain that when they pull that magic valve, it doesn't come spilling out of a pipe at the shoreline. Mm-hmm. But in the end, all of the effluent winds up coming back on the beaches here and in the water and making the recreational opportunities here, especially in Burlington, null and void.
Mm-hmm. We'll leave it there. Lawrence, the question to you then is, what do you see is the federal role, if there is one, in cleaning up Lake Champlain?
Well, first of all, since it's a lake that the frontiers, the boundaries of it are shared by 2 states, by definition, it is a federal responsibility. But here's the hopeful sign, which gets triggered in my remembrance by one of the things that Brooke just said. all of those phosphates that find their way into Lake Champlain, instead of going and serving the purpose they're meant to serve, to fertilize the soil, now we have something called precision injection of fertilizer due to the incredible advances in technology which we need to promote and take more advantage of. What does that mean? That means that the farmers can now focus the exact amount in the exact location at the exact time, the amount of fertilizer for that exact crop, and not have to drown the field with it and hope for the best, and then the extra goes into the lake. And this is just one of the hopeful examples of how the modern technology that has come forward in the digital age is solving and will solve so many of the problems that have plagued us. For example, on this subject of environment and agriculture, things like drone monitoring of crops, artificial intelligence, automatic milking machines, ways to measure crops using GPS. There's so many different opportunities. With regard to environment, coming off of Lake Champlain for a moment, electric cars, which some people love to hate, and with good reason sometimes, because we all know that the electricity that they use gets produced by coal burning plants and other burning plants. But nowadays, and on the near horizon, the electric cars, because of the advances in material science, the electric cars are going to have a charge that will go for hundreds of miles or maybe even 1,000 instead of just a paltry 250. And instead of sitting there for 45 minutes winding your watch while your car is charging, it'll get done in 5 or 10 minutes. Then we're going to have electric cars that the market is going to really demand, and the demand is going to push down the price. They'll become more ubiquitous, and we'll have people like to call a smaller carbon footprint.
Very good. Okay.
There's more, but anyway.
Okay. Jasdeep, we'll go to you. The question is, what do you see is the federal role, if any, in cleaning up Lake Champlain, and how will your candidacy affect that?
I believe it is a federal responsibility because the lake does share 2 states. My simple approach is that I think first and foremost we need to literally have people physically go in and clean up what we can by hand. I think that needs to happen at the shorelines. I think that's a basic way to start. I think also, it's not just Lake Champlain. We have Great Lakes all across America. And the problem is that we have sewer pipes that are antiquated, and they are causing leaks. And this is obviously what's happening in Vermont as well. And it's really sad about the antiquated septic tanks that are really the core, I believe, of the issue of this pollution that we can address and try to collect on, or try to eviscerate and take away. So I think that's the next step. Is first, as I said, to start on small steps. Have everyone, we need to have people come in, whomever it might be, to physically take what we can from the shallow end. I think we need to also work on making the new pipes lines, because a lot of them are antiquated, a lot of them are causing leaks, et cetera. But this also dovetails and ties into development and research of infrastructure, because these are all connected, even waterways and streetways and bridges. We have a 1,000 bridges a year committee, because our goal is if you have good bridges, you'll have good roads, and if you have good infrastructure, you usually have a better community and a better economy. So in furtherance not only of cleaning Lake Champlain, but also to make sure that Lake Champlain in the future does not end up having these exorbitant amounts of sewage that was spilled into it. I mean, it's unfortunate. I know a lot of Vermonters are directly affected by it. You can see when they went in after the sewage spill that so many people had manifestations of a virus and an illness. So it needs to start. But as I said, we're all about fundamentals. I think first and foremost, you got to just get in the shallow end and just start picking clean stuff up that you can by hand.
Okay. We have time for one last question before final comments.
Very good.
And this is going to dovetail from the environment into the Vermont family farm. And Lawrence, we'll give this last question to you. What is the future of the Vermont farm? And what do you see the federal role in agriculture? We've heard that people on this forum are sort of anti-socialist, yet the Farm Bill is a handout to farmers around this country, artificially supporting the price of milk as an example. What do you see as the future of Vermont farms, and what do you plan to affect as your role if you are elected to the U.S. Senate?
First of all, let me say that I'm happy to note that the Vermont brand, when it comes to food and consumables, is a wonderful brand. It's an artisan brand that's loved, it's respected, not only in Vermont, but throughout the country and even in the world. And this brand is something that needs to be more fully exploited. Now, granted, this is more of a job of a governor and a state legislature, but as long as we're on the subject of food and farming, I think it's a very valuable point to be made, because while we're talking about problems, it's good to recall the resources and the opportunities that we have. Now, with regard to opportunities for farming, the whole process would benefit, like most industries, by being highly decentralized. Nowadays, there are so many technologies that make it so that even a single household, not to mention a small 20, 30, 50 acre farm, can grow organic crops, can grow many different crops so much more efficiently and with so many fewer resources than even 5, 10, or 15 years ago. Coming back to the dairy industry, which is so important to our heritage, to our state, and to so many dairy farmers who have regrettably been shrinking in number. Dairy farmers need to be educated about the technology that is going to make it possible for them to survive and even thrive. Things like automatic milking machines, the artificial intelligence capabilities, things like I talked about already, the precision injection of fertilizers. All of these types of advances in agriculture need to be brought from the academic and frontier development stage right down to the farmers in our local towns and communities. And I would encourage, as a senator, forums and educational opportunities to bring these technologies to our farmers. And even though I'm not one for adding layers of subsidy, if there was ever going to be a subsidy or a replacement for subsidizing milk, perhaps part of that subsidy ought to be swerved over into helping to educate farmers about these technologies.
Very good. Jasdeep, the future of Vermont farms, Vermont agriculture, and what do you see your role or the role of Vermont Senator?
Vermont farmers are just great people. I love going door to door to see them. But Vermont farmers are very much a core part of Vermont, and also the United States for that matter. But I think we are losing some farmers. My understanding is that there is a lot of kind of monopolizing going on by the big farms consuming the small farms, and that's really unfortunate. And I think what has happened is that we lost some opportunities to give farmers another opportunity to have a cash crop, and that specifically was about the marijuana legislation. If the way the governor did it, I think it was just set up extremely poorly. If you were going to legalize it where you can possess it and grow it, but you can't sell it, you took away the most material benefit that it really offered. It's almost easier to keep it illegal for that, to be honest. But I think that's an opportunity that's lost, because that's a cash crop that some farmers could have taken care of. It would have generated income for some individuals, and if we can get a few small farms to start, because what we want are more small farms to develop throughout Vermont and actually throughout America, because more small farms we have, like we talk about free trade, making the world better. I mean, more small farms, I think, also make free trade and make more opportunity, and also give more benefits and more cost efficiency to everybody.
Very good. We'll leave the final comment to you, Brooke Paige.
Okay, very good.
The state of Vermont's agricultural economy and what you see the Vermont Senator's role in it.
Very good. Well, first of all, we talked about Lawrence talked about the Vermont brand, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that Cabot Cheese and Bill Davis were the ones that 35 years ago first brought premium branding to agricultural products, especially Vermont agricultural products, through Cabot Cheese and Cabot Butter. The farms here in Vermont are disappearing so quickly that now it's 10% of them a year. The math tells you 10 years from now we will basically have no farms in Vermont with real farmers on them. What we'll have left are maybe hobby farms. Industrial milk and industrial dairy is part of what's killing this. And we talk about price supports and subsidies are socialism. No, they're not, because in the 30s the government set up and began this whole convoluted program of price supports and dairy subsidies and things like that. And the farmers are now addicted to it, if you like, because of the government. Every farmer I know would rather be free of all of the subsidies and regulations that restrict how much milk they can produce and when they can produce it, how they can fertilize their fields or not fertilize their fields. And it's another place where the government stepped in. Everything the government touches withers, an old professor of mine used to tell me. And I think agriculture, especially the dairy farming, is a prime example of that. The other thing we have to understand, and the state as well as the feds have to support and try to restore many of the farms that we've already lost or are about ready to lose, because there's an integration between the farming and agriculture here in Vermont and tourism. People don't come here to see black billboards all out in the field or the tops of the mountains chopped off with giant wind turbines. They come here for the pastoral settings and the green mountains of Vermont. And if we fail to preserve that, our tourist dollars are going to go away at the same time that our agricultural dollars go away.
Okay, very good. Time now for final candidates, final comments of our three candidates. We do ask that we are running short on time, that we keep our comments to 60 seconds so we can get to our next program on time. We'll begin with Jasdeep in his final comments.
Thank you. We have goals for Panu for the People. We have a strategic plan to make our goals a success, including, as we said, roads, not rehab, schools, not prisons. Also to get the Child Trafficking Enforcement Agency to replace the DEA so we do not continue on this destructive, corrupt path that is the drug catastrophe or the drug trade. There are viable ways to make our goals accomplished, and thank you for listening tonight, and hope that you go out and vote on August 14th. Once again, my name is Jasdeep Panu. Thank you.
Very good. Brooke Paige, your final comment.
Okay, very good. Only a minute. That's kind of tough haul here. In the end, this is all about getting rid of an intractable state senator, Bernie Sanders, and a senator who doesn't even really have his interest focused on Vermont. He has it focused on his next career as he thinks president of the United States.
It's U.S. Senator, by the way. You said state senator.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I probably would do it less harm as a state senator, but that's just me. Anyway, this campaign isn't all about slogans or sloganeering. This is about getting rid of somebody that's really doing real harm to the country and to the state. Not so much by what he accomplishes, because he accomplishes nothing. He's passed in the years that he's been in there, he's named 3 post offices and passed 2 pieces of legislation. But it's the corruption of the mind that he does to our young folks by making them believe that socialism and free, let's say, stuff is the way. And he never points out that somebody's got to pay for all the free stuff. And like in all socialist systems, the free stuff only continues till other people's money runs out. So I thank you very much. I remind you that my name is Brooke Paige, and I'm the only person you can legally vote for 6 times on the Republican primary ballot on August 14th. God bless and thank you.
Thank you, Brooke Paige. Lawrence, your final comments.
Yeah, so I'm wondering if Brooke is running for 6 offices, which one we should vote for him for. I'm running for 1 office. I'm running to be your next U.S. Senator. I'm running because I believe that I'm most well equipped to go toe-to-toe with Senator Sanders and come out as a victor. But let me ask you to consider something. Imagine, God forbid, your family, 4 of your family members were sick with an infectious plague, and you came to me, the doctor, and the doctor offered you a serum, and the serum was very expensive, but you paid for it anyway. And you took the serum, but God forbid, what happened was your family got sicker. Now imagine that you had a senator and you had a healthcare system. And his idea was that this healthcare system was going to solve all of your problems, solve all of the country's problems, solve all of the state's problems. But instead of solving the problems and providing the healthcare you wanted, it actually made you sicker and it didn't deliver. Now, the first example was Fanciful. The second example is what we have right now. We have a senator who's promising something that can't be delivered, will never be delivered, $32 trillion over 10 years. It's just not going to happen. Furthermore, what will work is not a government monopoly and not a crony capitalist monopoly. What will happen is the winds of free enterprise and competition flowing through the state and the country, driving down the cost of the health insurance and elevating the quality of the service. I hope that you consider me on August 14th when you go to the Republican primary. My name is Lawrence Zupan. My website, zupanforsenate.org. Thank you for your attention.
Very good. Lawrence Zupan, Brooke Paige, Jasti Panu. A pleasure having you on the stage here this evening, and thank you so much for your candidacy. It takes a lot of courage to put your name on a ballot. I'm Matt Kelly for Channel 17, Town Meeting Television. For all our latest candidate forums, visit our website, ch17.tv. Thank you for watching. Good night.